Was it legal at the time?
No, and this is part of what happened. When Leonard was the medicine man for it. There were 7 sun dancers. They started to have the Sundance in the little hamlet of Wounded Knee.
Where is that?
Wounded Knee is in South Dakota, and it was as a symbolic gesture because the American cavalry had a huge slaughter of women and children. And there's a book by, I think his name is Scott Brown, it's called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. And it's about how the American cavalry came into this camp where the women and children, mostly, there weren't so many men there, and just slaughtered hundreds of the people. And they just left them there. And there's photographs of this, that are really pretty horrific. And so they had outlawed Native American spiritual practice from then on. That was like 91 or something like that, in the late 1800s. So Leonard wanted to do this. Well, must have been 71 because I think it was a 100-year anniversary. So Leonard wanted to have a Sundance at Wounded Knee, the village of Wounded Knee. All 7 Sundancers were busted and thrown in jail by the cops.
Including Leonard?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So we were traveling from Manhattan all the way out to South Dakota, and we heard on the radio that all 7 Sundancers were in jail. So we looked at each other and we said, are we going to go back to Manhattan or are we going to go to South Dakota? We said, let's go to South Dakota. So by the time we got there, the Sundance circle had been set up on Leonard's father's land, Henry Crow Dog. His mother, Mary, and Henry Crow Dog had managed to hang on to 80 acres of private land because on the reservations, much of the land had been sold to the whites, and they refused to sell their land. So it was private land, and they couldn't do anything about it. The cops could not come onto private land and bust anybody there. So we got there, and the Sundance Circle had been set up. The tree was in the middle. It was being smudged with sage all the way around, to purify the air. The Sundancers had been doing sweat lodges, been in the sweat lodge. They'd been fasting already for about 2 days before the Sundance ceremony. So they're in a very altered state. And then here are 2 photographs. Can you see that? The top one is of the Sundances. I think that's the next summer at, let me just see what it says. Those are the Sundancers, right? There's a teepee, and that's at Rosebud. The summer I was there.
Where is Rosebud?
It's in South Dakota.
The previous one was at Wounded Knee when they got arrested, and then the next year was at Rosebud?
No, it was the same year.
The same
year. So they left the little hamlet of Rosebud, Wounded Knee, and went to the Crow Dog private property and set up the teepee and the whole Sundance Circle on the private property so they couldn't be stopped by the government. And down here is a photograph of me with headphones on, and Frank Cavastani was doing the video at that point. we made a really interesting video of the Sundance with Leonard's permission.
Was that by the Video Freaks, or this was an independent?
This is an independent thing. Yeah, right. So,
at the time when Sundances were being done, were European Americans generally invited, or was it a closed thing for Native Americans?
No, you had to know someone. Although Henry Crow Dog, the elder, was what was called a blanket Indian, and he was of the old school where he didn't want to close off people who were interested. So there would be people from Germans and some Europeans would kind of float through. They'd hear on the grapevine that they could go to the Crow Dog property and talk to Henry. And
what's a blanket Indian?
Well, a blanket is an old-fashioned Indian, I think. Yeah, and but I'm not 100% sure of that term. But Henry was open to outsiders. There are a lot of Native Americans who are not open to outsiders, and with good reason. They've been really ripped off on a very profound level, and the trust is not there, and that's perfectly understandable.
So I'm curious, what kind of feelings did witnessing that Sundance evoke for you as a now getting to know the history of the country and seeing the original inhabitants? How did you feel? What did that?
I had an immense respect because I have never believed in the Christian way. I am much more interested in a natural way of being on the planet. I relate to the sun and the moon and the seasons and respecting the earth and taking care of Mother Earth. And that to me was much closer to the way the Native Americans lived. And
still live.
And still live. And still live. And still are tuned in to this, how to pick a crop. You don't pick the whole thing. You pick very carefully so that it can rejuvenate. I mean, there's just a lot of really subtle things that I can relate to, and it's not, this white imperialist capitalist society that just does this slash and burn, cutting forests. I mean, in Brazil they're doing the same thing. I mean, it's horrific what's going on, and it's all it's all for money. It's all for who has more money. Who has more money, therefore who has more power. And to me, that is the antithesis of the way I believe. It's just not, it's not kind, it's not respectful. And if we continue in this manner, we're, human beings as we know them and life on the planet in human beings will disappear. We will make ourselves extinct if we continue doing this attitude of capitalism and colonialism and going into other countries and telling other people what to do. It's just really horrific, and I wonder if we're going to wake up or not. I really do. I'm very concerned, and I'm very concerned for young people especially.
So when you had this experience, did it inspire you to change things about yourself or to incorporate other ways of being and living?
Yes. I saw a role model. All of a sudden I saw a culture that thought more the way I had just kind of on my own thought. Because my parents were very much into nature as well, and my mother was a botanist, and she grew her own food, a lot of it, and they were respectful on a certain way, you know. And we spent a ton of time outside and you know, and taking care of gardens and things like that. So there were, and my parents my father refused to have a television when we were little. I thought that was pretty enlightened looking back on it. But anyway, it has influenced me, this experience,